Russia has signaled it may dial back its war aims to focus on eastern Ukraine after failing to break the nation's resistance in a month of fighting and attacks on civilians, including up to 300 feared in the ing of a theater. The possible shift came ahead of a planned meeting by United States President Joe Biden with Ukrainian refugees in Poland and talks with his Polish counterpart Andrzej Duda in Warsaw before he gives a speech on the brutal war. The White House said Russian President Vladimir Putin had ordered the February invasion to destroy Ukraine's military and topple pro-Western President Volodymyr Zelensky, bringing the country under Russia's sway. But Sergei Rudskoy, a senior general, suggested a considerably reduced main goal of controlling Donbass, an eastern region already partly held by Russian proxies. His surprise statement came as a Western official reported that a 7th Russian general, Lieutenant General Yakov Ryazantsev, had in Ukraine, and that a colonel had been deliberately, by his own demoralized men. Complicating Moscow's challenges, invasion troops were facing a counteroffensive in Kherson, the only major Ukrainian city under Russian control. Visiting Warsaw, about 80 kilometers from Ukraine, Mr. Biden praised Ukraine's incredible resistance, comparing the conflict to a bigger version of Communist China's 1989 crushing of protests in Tiananmen Square. Mr. Biden told soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division that the struggle in Eastern Europe represents a historic inflection point. Are democracies going to prevail, or are autocracies going to prevail? And that's really what's at stake, Biden said. The US leader was briefed on the humanitarian situation, with more than 3.7 million refugees fleeing Ukraine, most of them into Poland. A man rides a bicycle as black smoke rises from a fuel storage of the Ukrainian army following a Russian attack on the outskirts of Kiev, Ukraine, on Friday, the 25th of March 2022. Source: AP Rodrigo Abd. Earlier, he ended a trip to Brussels for meetings with Western allies by announcing new measures to help the European Union shed dependence on imported Russian energy. The plan is part of a sea change in the West, which for years has shrunk from direct confrontation with the Kremlin, but now seeks to make Mr. Putin a pariah. Kherson now contested city, Pentagon says. Ukrainian forces launched a counteroffensive in Kherson, the country's only major city seized by Russian troops, and it is once again contested, a senior US defense official said Friday. The Ukrainians are trying to take Kherson back, and we would argue that Kherson is actually contested territory again, the Pentagon official told reporters. We can't corroborate exactly who is in control of Kherson, but the point is, it doesn't appear to be as solidly in Russian control as it was before, said the official, who spoke on condition of anonymity. If the Ukrainian forces manage to regain control of the strategic city located at the mouth of the Dnieper, Russian troops around Mykolaiv would be sandwiched between Ukrainian forces defending Mykolaiv and those in Kherson, the official said. That would make it very, very difficult for them to make any kind of ground movement on Odessa, the main seaport still held by the Ukrainians. That would be a significant development, no question about that, in terms of the southern part of the war, he said. The Pentagon said there was also very heavy fighting to the northwest of the capital Kiev, where the Ukrainians are trying hard to dislodge the Russians from Bucha and Irpin. Russia is meanwhile mobilizing forces from separatist territories of Georgia to deploy in Ukraine, the official said. We've seen our first indications that they are trying to send in some reinforcements from Georgia, the senior official told reporters. Following a flashpoint conflict with Georgia in 2008, Russia recognized the independence of two pro-Russian Georgian separatist regions, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and established military bases there. Children, written clearly. Russia's far bigger military continued to combat determined Ukrainian defenders using Western-supplied weapons, from near the capital Kiev to Kharkiv, the Donbass region, and the devastated southern port city of Mariupol. Authorities said they fear some 300 civilians in Mariupol may have in a Russian airstrike on a theater being used as a shelter last week. The theater was targeted despite the word "children" being written in large Russian letters on the ground outside, so as to be visible to pilots. Russian forces hammering Mariupol's outgunned defenders consider the city a linchpin in their attempt to create a land corridor between the Crimea region Moscow already seized in 2014 and the Donbass. Leaving behind a home that has become a hellscape, Oksana Vinokurova, 33, counted the cost. "I have escaped, but I have lost all my family. I have lost my house. I am desperate," she told news agency AFP after escaping Mariupol by train to the western city of Lviv. "My mum is. I left my mother in the yard like a dog, because everybody's." Shelling damage in a residential area in the city of Mariupol, Ukraine, on the 25th of March 2022. Source: AAP TASS SIPA USA. Also disembarking from the train, Svetlana Kuznetsova said, "There is no water, light and electricity. We were living in cellars. We were cooking food on fires. I have never seen such horror. There is no Mariupol," the middle-aged woman added, comparing her city to Grozny, the capital of Chechnya that Russian forces obliterated during wars in the 1990s. "Everything is destroyed." Eastern focus. Russia's army was predicted by some to roll across Ukraine with little resistance. However, Mr. Putin's military has been beset by many of the same problems plaguing its ranks as far back as the Chechen wars: poor discipline and morale, faulty equipment and tactics, and brutality toward civilians. Amid heavy censorship, Russian authorities on Friday gave only their second official military toll since the start, at 1,351. This is far below Western estimates, with one senior NATO official saying between 7,000 and 15,000 Russian soldiers have. Mr. Rudskoy's announcement of a pivot to the battle for eastern Ukraine was accompanied by claims of success. He said Ukraine's military has been severely degraded and that the reason Russia had not seized cities was to prevent destruction and minimize losses among personnel and civilians. Residents carrying groceries walk away from a building that was just hit by Russian armament and caught on fire in the Moskovsky district in Kharkiv, Ukraine, on Friday, the 25th of March 2022. Source: Marcus Yam, a Los Angeles Times. His reference to plans for a liberation of the Donbass region could now lay the groundwork for the Kremlin to focus on an easier campaign that can be sold to Russians as a victory. However, Ukrainians are mounting an increasingly aggressive defense, and in places even taking back ground. Britain's defense ministry said Ukrainian counterattacks and Russian forces falling back on overextended supply lines had allowed Ukraine to reoccupy towns and defensive positions up to 35 kilometers east of Kiev. Chemical weapons warning. As the Russian war machine stumbles, Western officials are warning Mr. Putin could resort to more extreme measures, including chemical weapons. In Brussels on Thursday for NATO, EU and G7 summits, Biden said the NATO alliance would respond if Putin does use chemical warfare, though his national security advisor Jake Sullivan later stressed the United States itself has no intention of using chemical weapons, period, under any circumstance. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov accused Mr. Biden of seeking to divert attention. Mr. Putin, whom Mr. Biden again branded a war criminal, gave a speech Friday saying that Russia was the victim, comparing Western boycotts to Nazis in Germany.